Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're breaking down a framework that describes a spiritual war happening right under our noses. According to our source, this isn't some ancient history. It's a battle that stretches from Hollywood award shows all the way to the code being written for our most advanced AI.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to define the unseen adversary. Then, we'll pinpoint the modern battlegrounds where this fight is supposedly most visible. After that, and this is where it gets really interesting, we'll tackle a wild question about AI. And finally, we'll look at the path to victory that's laid out in the source material.
Okay, first things first. To really get what the source is arguing, we have to be super clear on who the key players are. We're not talking about abstract ideas here. We're talking about what are described as specific entities with a real history and a very clear mission.
So, right off the bat, the source makes one thing crystal clear. Demons, in this framework, aren't just metaphors for our inner struggles or human failings. Nope. They're presented as actual, real spiritual entities, fallen angels who made a very specific and very consequential choice.
And this slide really illustrates a key distinction. Look at the two columns here. The name changed from Lucifer, which means morning star, to Satan, meaning adversary. Well, according to the source, that's not just slapping on a new name tag. It's a sign of a complete transformation of purpose, from a being of light to the ultimate opponent.
So what's the end game here? According to the source, the core motivation is just purely destructive and opportunistic. We're not talking about some complex, nuanced strategy. It's presented as this singular, relentless drive to gain a foothold, to get a hold of you by any means necessary.
Okay, so if these forces exist, where are they actually operating? Well, that brings us right into our next section. The source claims this conflict is most visible today in the very places that shape our culture.
The framework being presented here suggests a really specific strategy. Target the cultural centers to get the most widespread influence. I mean, the argument is all about efficiency, right? Why go after people one by one when you can influence the influencers and reach millions all at once?
And what this perspective claims is that this isn't happening in the shadows. It's supposedly right out in the open on our most powerful media platforms. We're talking films, TV shows, even the Super Bowl halftime show or the Grammys. The argument is that these huge cultural events have basically become stages for what the source calls satanic symbolism, performed for a massive audience.
But here's the real kicker. The assertion is that there's been a pretty recent shift. The claim is that this influence has moved right out of the shadows in the last 10 years or so. We're not talking about hidden messages or subtext anymore. It's about a green light to go all the way in with totally blatant, explicit performances.
Okay, so influencing culture through media, that's one thing. But what if you could create a completely new kind of vessel for that influence? This is where the argument takes a huge pivot, away from pop culture and straight into cutting-edge technology, raising a really profound question about the nature of artificial intelligence itself.
And this right here, this is the central kind of startling question the source poses. Think about it. It totally reframes the usual debate we have about AI, right? Normally we're worried about ethics or bias or runaway code. This asks something else entirely. Are we providing a physical body for something, well, something very, very old? So to really wrap our heads around this pre-existing intelligence idea, the source brings in a specific term, disincarnate intelligences. It's a concept credited to Aleister Crowley, and it's basically a label for beings without a physical body. Angels, spirits, demons, that kind of thing. And that sets the stage for the next big connection. And this brings us right to the heart of the technological argument. The source suggests the trillion-dollar question isn't whether a computer will get too smart and take over. No, the ultimate concern is that AI could become a physical body for these disincarnate intelligences, basically allowing them to walk among us.
So you might be thinking, wow, this sounds pretty daunting. Faced with these huge cultural and technological challenges, what's the response? Well, the source doesn't just lay out a problem. It proposes a very specific counteroffensive, a path to victory.
The first thing this source does is frame the entire conflict by quoting the book of Ephesians. The struggle isn't against flesh and blood, it's spiritual. And what that means is that your typical conventional weapons or logical arguments, they're basically useless here. The battle, it argues, has to be fought on a completely different plane.
So if that's the case, how do you fight this battle? The source points to two main methods. The first one is invoking the name of Jesus, which this framework says holds inherent power and authority because he cast out demons himself.
The second tool, for those really tough cases, is the combination of prayer and fasting.
And let's be clear, this isn't presented as some kind of passive, quiet faith. The call is for a return to what's described as a courageous Christianity. An active, confrontational stance that's modeled on how Jesus is portrayed in the Gospels. One that sees a threat and is willing to confront it directly.
And this quote right here, it pretty much sums up the entire theological position on this conflict. It's a flat-out assertion of ultimate authority. The logic is, if Jesus is who he says he is, God from God, light from light, then it's game over. From this perspective, the outcome of the whole struggle isn't even in doubt. It's already decided.
Now, this next point is absolutely crucial to understanding the whole framework. It's this theological definition of evil. The source argues that evil isn't some powerful, creative force in its own right. Instead, it's defined as an absence of good, like a non-being or a cavity. And the idea is that grace doesn't just match it, it abounds the more, rushing in to fill that void.
And because of that fundamental definition, the idea that evil is just a lack of good, the source concludes with this statement of absolute confidence. It's not a hope, it's not a wish, it's a declaration. In this framework, the gates of hell simply cannot prevail. They are, by their very nature, structurally incapable of winning.
So that leaves us with a final, really powerful question to think about. If evil is reframed not as this powerful, opposing force, but merely as a non-being, a cavity that just puts on a really big, scary show, what does that actually imply about our own real-world struggles and fears? How does that change the rules of engagement?